Hello lovely people, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you've just joined us. My name is Nell and today's story feels almost like a personal one really, because it happened not too far from where I live, and although it happened a few years before I actually moved here, it still feels scarily close to home, to be perfectly honest. And it's a story which kind of sticks with me in the back of my mind when I'm out and about anywhere, especially if I'm kind of going to or from work and it's still dark. So yeah, I thought, especially in light of the current case in London, which I'm sure many of you know about, I thought it only kind of fitting that today's story be the case of Hannah Foster. So without further ado, grab a drink, dim the lights, and let's get into it. So on March 14th, 2003, 17-year-old Hannah Foster decided to go out for a couple of drinks with a friend that evening. Now, Hannah was an incredibly popular young woman. She was incredibly clever and had been planning to go to university to study medicine as well. And, you know, she had a really bright future in front of her. So the evening of the 14th, she and a friend met up. They had gone for a couple of drinks and they were out for a little while, but when it became apparent that they weren't going to bump into a friend of theirs that they had been planning on seeing, they decided to call it an evening. And Hannah walked her friend to the bus stop and saw her safely onto the bus and waved her off, and that would be the last time her friend would see her alive again. Now, as I said before, Hannah was an incredibly smart young woman. She was also very sensible, and whenever she was out with friends or anything like that, and she was planning on staying out for the evening or staying over at a friend's house or anything like that, she'd always tell her parents, you know, where she was and what was going on. And so when it got later and later, her parents started to become concerned about her, especially when any kind of calls or texts that they sent to her phone were unanswered. And by mid-morning of the 15th, they became worried enough to phone the police. And like I said, because she was never one to kind of go without telling her parents, you know, where she was or where she was going or anything like that, and her sudden disappearance was incredibly out of character for her, the police decided to start an investigation into her whereabouts, like there and then. They were that concerned. So when police went through the phone records, they found that a emergency 999 call had actually been made from Hannah's phone the previous evening. It had been put through to like an automated service when she hadn't given any response to the person who had picked up on the other end, the first responder, but because there had continued to have been no kind of communication from her, the call had been disconnected. Another thing that concerned police was the fact that when they went to have a look at the phone signals from Hannah's phone that had been picked up from the various phone towers in the area, it was quite clear that the phone had been travelling at quite a fast pace. So that told them that Hannah was in a vehicle of some kind. And when they played back the recording from the attempted phone call to 999, they were able to kind of catch segments of conversation from Hannah and who they identified as a man with a South Asian accent who was telling her to keep her head down, which at that point it then became clear that police were dealing with an abduction. Phone towers then put the phone as travelling between Southampton and Portsmouth in the early hours of the 15th, but at that point then, as the police were looking at the records, the phone was in fact stationary and it was somewhere down in Portsmouth. 2 days later, the worst fears were confirmed when a body was found on the outskirts of Southampton, and it was identified as being 17-year-old Hannah Foster. She had been raped and then strangled. Semen found on Hannah and other DNA found at the crime scene were put through the database back at the labs, but at that point no matches were found at all. But about a day or so later, Hannah's phone and bag would actually be found at a recycling plant in Portsmouth. Using CCTV, police were actually able to link the abductor and murderer to one of 7 vans in the area, and so a massive hunt was on to find each of those, and a massive investigation went underway. There was like public interviews and press conferences asking for any help in identifying who this killer was. Now, this method actually worked really well because a few days later, police actually got a telephone call from the owner of a food delivery company saying that he actually suspected one of his employees as a possible suspect. According to the owner, the employee had come into work on the 15th with a scratch on his face and had also apparently left work early that day complaining about a bad back. And when police actually looked into it, they discovered that the name of this employee linked to one of the vans which they'd been looking for. When police seized the van and investigated it, they actually found that the blood and the semen found in the van matched the blood and semen found on Hannah and on Hannah's clothes. They now had their man, and that man was Maninder Pal Singh Kohli. On March the 18th, police went to Kohli's house to arrest him, only to find the house completely empty. And when they were finally able to track down his wife, she told them that he had actually travelled to India just a couple of days previously to visit his dying mother, who was apparently in a coma after being in a car accident. Because Kohli had fled the UK, this would then be the start of a 5-year manhunt and fight to bring him to justice. Now, India is such a huge country, it really would have been like looking for a needle in a haystack. And when the police force here reached out to the Indian police, they were really quite unhelpful. They were unable to make Hannah's case a priority just because of all the cases that police over in India were handling at the time, and because obviously the crime hadn't been committed over there, it's been committed here in England, they were unwilling to really do much to help. Now, it was previously considered that Kohli's family over in India could well have been helping to hide him and provide him with some kind of sanctuary for, you know, in light of what he had done. However, it turned out that his brother was actually a police officer himself, and his father is actually quoted as saying, "I say, if he's committed this crime, hang him. I will be the last person to protect him. If he has done this grave crime, he should be punished. He should face the consequences. I will not protect him. If he's innocent, God will protect him." Which, absolutely fair play to his father. You know, you hear of so many people committing crimes and their families are, you know, they're always behind them, always defending them, always having their back. But this father, I take my hat off to him, absolutely. He's not messing around here at all, which, yeah, absolutely fair play to him. In July 2004, Hannah's parents actually travelled to Chandigarh in India to actually appeal directly to the Indian people to help them find Kohli. They did multiple press and news conferences, and a hotline was actually started up to encourage people to call in with any kind of information that they had concerning Kohli's whereabouts, and a total of 5 million rupees were offered as a reward for any like information that could lead to finding him. A few days later, a taxi driver actually phoned the hotline to say that Kohli had been in his taxi not long beforehand, and he had given his name as Mike and had apparently come over to India on holiday from the UK, and he had taken on a completely new identity and started an entirely new life, even going so far as to marry another woman over there. Bearing in mind he was still actually married at the time, so we can just, you know, add bigamy to the list of what makes this guy just absolutely vile, in all honesty. 5 days later, Kohli was arrested trying to board a bus to Nepal. Now, Nepal doesn't have any extradition treaty, so if he had been able to get across to Nepal, that would have been it. He would have been untouchable, and they would have never found him, or even if they had, they would have been unable to bring him back. 16 months after Hannah's murder, he was finally in custody, but the fight was still far from over. On July 28th, 2004, Kohli confessed his crimes on a televised interview, and when asked why he was doing this, he admitted that he was doing it because he was tired of running. He's quoted as saying, "She was crossing the road as I was coming out of the Mitre pub. My van was parked on where she was walking. I took my vehicle around to the other road and saw her again. Then I stopped my van and abducted her. I was totally drunk that night." After he had abducted and raped her, he then went on to strangle her to death. And when asked why he had done it, he responded that he'd done it because she didn't promise not to go to the police and tell them what he had done. And so he had come up behind her and strangled her from behind. Although he had made this televised confession, a few days later he actually retracted his statement, saying that it wasn't true and that he'd been forced to make it. Coley was held in custody in New Delhi for 3 years, and during that time there were over 100 court proceedings and 35 appeals in order to try to bring him back to the UK to face justice for what he'd done to Hannah. As well as the stress of this, Hannah's mother was also being treated for breast cancer at the same time, which, my God, you know, just to have that added stress put on you, as well as the stress of trying to bring your daughter's killer to justice, I can't imagine. I have had family and friends go through cancer treatments. I know how stressful and terrifying that is, and the very idea of having to deal with not just an incredibly scary diagnosis like cancer, but having to deal with that on top of bringing a killer to justice. I can't imagine the kind of strength you'd need for that, quite honestly. It's unimaginable. However, the fight was worth it, because in June 2007, Coley was finally brought back to the UK to face trial for the murder of Hannah Foster. Coley's trial began in October of 2008 at Winchester Crown Court, and he was not going to go down without a fight. Despite all the evidence that was stacked up against him and linking him to this crime, as well as his own televised confession, he actually pled not guilty, which is complete madness. He tried every trick in the book to attempt to get a not guilty verdict. He first of all said that he had been set up and that he had gone drinking and then had gone back to the van to find that someone had dumped a dead body in the van. He then changed his story to the fact that a gang had like abducted him and forced him to rape and kill Hannah Foster. You know, he came up with so many different stories and so many like excuses, but in the end the jury saw through all of his lies, all the stories, and he was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum sentence of 24 years, which honestly isn't all that long, I don't think, considering everything that he'd done. And I know that Hannah's family weren't happy with the outcome, but obviously there's been something resembling justice for Hannah now. Coley is still behind bars and has the possibility of getting out by 2030, which honestly, if you think about it, isn't really all that long. My heart absolutely goes out to Hannah and her family and everyone who knew her. And honestly, I'm just so glad that, you know, they were able to finally catch him and bring him to something resembling justice. Like I said, this is a story which feels very close to home for me, and I think always will, in all honesty. And it reminds me to be more aware when I'm out and about, which, you know, in this day and age, it shouldn't have to be like that. You know, women should be able to walk down the street and feel safe doing so. I mean, she was only about a half a mile from home, you know, and it's honestly scary. The world is a scary place out there. And it seems to be getting scarier by the day, in all honesty. Yeah. Stay safe out there, guys, really. You're never too sure who's around the corner. On that note, that is the end of today's video. If you enjoyed it, then be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and if you really enjoy my content, then be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell to be informed whenever I bring up new content in the future. In the meantime, stay safe and sweet dreams.